For years, America worshipped Audie Murphy as the ideal soldier. The scrappy Texas kid who went to war, outfought entire battalions, and came home draped in more medals than any soldier in the history of the United States. Hollywood turned him into a movie star. The government held him up as the face of American valor, and the public, grateful, proud, and hungry for heroes, believed every inch of the legend. But behind the Bronze Star and the silver screen was a man far more complicated than any story he was ever asked to tell. A man battling nightmares. A man dependent on pills. A man who gambled away fortunes, chased other women, and slowly unraveled from the inside out. All while America applauded. And after he was gone, killed at just 46 years old in a plane crash that shocked the nation, the woman who knew him better than anyone finally set the record straight. Pamela Murphy, his devoted second wife, confirmed in her own quiet, unflinching words what the rumors had whispered for years, that the man she loved was guilty of adultery, financial ruin, and desertion at the end. And then she said something that floored everyone who heard it. Even with the adultery and desertion at the end, Pamela told a journalist, "He always remained my hero." That sentence, 7 words of forgiveness and 4 words of love, is perhaps the most honest thing ever said about Audie Murphy. Today, we are telling the full story. The hero, the wreckage, and the woman who carried it all with dignity. To understand Audie Murphy the man, you have to understand Audie Murphy the boy. Because the poverty, the grief, and the determination he carried into adulthood were not incidental to his story. They were the story. Murphy was born on June 20th, 1925, in Kingston, Texas, the 7th of 12 children in a poor sharecropping family. His father abandoned the family, and his mother died when Audie was still a teenager. That loss, the loss of the one person who anchored his world, left a wound that never closed. Murphy himself acknowledged it plainly in later years, saying he left school in the 5th grade and picked cotton for $1 a day to help his brothers and sisters survive. When his mother died, 3 of his youngest siblings were placed in a children's home. He worked at a radio repair shop. He hunted game to put food on the table. By the time World War II broke out, Audie Murphy had already lived several lifetimes of hardship. He had nothing to lose, which, as it turned out, made him one of the most dangerous soldiers the United States Army had ever fielded. After Pearl Harbor, he tried to enlist. The Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps all turned him down. Too young, too small, too underweight. He persisted, with his sister's help. His birth records were quietly altered, and on June 30th, 1942, he was finally accepted into the U.S. Army. He was still a teenager. He shipped out to North Africa, then Sicily, then the Italian mainland, then France, never stopping, never backing down, always going back after every wound and every illness to the front line that seemed to want him dead. By January 1945, Audie Murphy had already earned the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, and multiple Purple Hearts. He had been wounded 3 times and had killed approximately 240 German soldiers during the course of the war. But the day that would define his name forever came on January 26, 1945, near a small French village called Haute-Souire in the icy forest of Alsace. On the outskirts of Haute-Souire, France, Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment was attacked by 6 German tanks and an estimated 250 German infantrymen. Certain his decimated company could not withstand the onslaught. First Lieutenant Audie Murphy ordered his men to fall back to safety deep in the forest. He did not go with them. After expending all his carbine ammunition, Murphy spotted the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the turret of a burning tank destroyer whose crew had already fled. He climbed on top of it, alone in full view of the enemy, already wounded in both legs, and began to fire. For approximately an hour, he stood on that burning vehicle and held back waves of German infantry, simultaneously directing artillery fire by telephone. His official Medal of Honor citation records that he killed or wounded approximately 50 enemy soldiers before finally running out of ammunition by the end of the war. Murphy had received every medal for valor that the United States had to offer: the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts, making him the most decorated American soldier of World War II. When reporters later asked him why he had taken on so, many enemy soldiers alone. He gave an answer that had nothing to do with heroism or patriotism or duty. He said simply, America welcomed Audie Murphy home in 1945 as a living legend. James Cagney had seen his photo on the cover of Life magazine, the fresh-faced, boyish war hero who looked more like a high school student than a battlefield titan, and brought him to Hollywood. The story arc was perfect. Poor boy from Texas becomes greatest soldier in American history, then becomes a movie star. The whole country was enchanted, but the man living inside that story was struggling in ways the public never saw. Plagued by insomnia and nightmares stemming from his combat experiences, Murphy battled what would eventually be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder throughout his life. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow, even in his own home, surrounded by peace and family. Some part of Audie Murphy's brain remained in the foxholes of France. Waiting for the next attack, he looked for solace in addictive sleeping pills. The dependency worsened over time. By the mid-1960s, he realized he had become dangerously reliant on the sedative Placidil. Rather than check into a facility or seek outside help, he handled it in characteristically stubborn fashion, locking himself alone in a hotel room for a week and breaking the addiction through sheer force of will. That choice said everything about who Audie Murphy was. Immensely capable, deeply private, and constitutionally resistant to asking for help. What made this doubly painful was that Murphy understood exactly what he was experiencing, and he wanted others to understand it too. He became an early and passionate advocate for veterans' mental health at a time when the subject was barely discussed in polite society. He called on the United States government to provide better psychiatric care for veterans returning from Korea and Vietnam. He spoke openly about his own struggles so that other soldiers would not feel ashamed of theirs. He was decades ahead of the cultural conversation on PTSD. Yet the same man who could stand on a burning tank destroyer and fight off 250 enemy soldiers could not quite stand up against the slower, quieter enemies within himself. The addiction, the financial recklessness, the infidelity, and the rage. Here is where the story takes a turn that the public had long suspected but never fully confirmed. Until Pamela Murphy, in the years after her husband's death, spoke with the directness of a woman who had loved someone completely, been failed by him profoundly, and forgiven him anyway. The rumors had circulated for years that Audie Murphy had affairs, that he had not been faithful to Pamela, the quiet, steady Texan woman who had left her career as a Braniff airline stewardess to build a home and raise their two sons, Terry and James, while Audie's fame made the world revolve around him. When journalist Steve Lopez wrote about Pamela in 2010, he confirmed what those close to the family had long known. Audie Murphy died broke, squandering millions of dollars on gambling, bad investments, and yes, other women. And Pamela, with the kind of grace that requires a certain amount of steel underneath, said simply, even with the adultery and desertion at the end, he always remained my hero. There it is, the confirmation delivered not in anger, not in bitterness, not in a tell-all memoir crafted for revenge, but in a quiet, matter-of-fact sentence by a woman who had decided that the full truth of a man was more complicated than either his legend or his failures. The financial picture was equally grim. In his later years, Murphy squandered his fortune on gambling and bad investments, and was in financial ruin when he died. He had accrued substantial gambling debt, and the IRS was pursuing him for back taxes. The man who had once earned a fortune in Hollywood, through films, royalties, his memoir, and his brand, died essentially bankrupt. He was 46 years old, and he had spent everything. Pamela Murphy inherited the debt, not a fraction of it, all of it. On May 28, 1971, Memorial Day weekend, a date that now carries an irony that is almost too sharp to bear, Audie Murphy boarded a private Aero Commander 680 aircraft near Roanoke, Virginia, to inspect a potential investment in Martinsville. The weather was catastrophic. Rain, fog, low clouds, and near-zero visibility. The plane crashed into a mountain near Roanoke, Virginia. Everyone on board was killed, including the pilot and 4 passengers. Audie Murphy was 46 years old. The nation was stunned. President Richard Nixon issued a statement saying Murphy epitomized the gallantry and action of America's fighting men. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery on June 7, 1971, attended by figures including future President George H.W. Bush and General William Westmoreland. His grave at Arlington became the second most visited in the cemetery, second only to President John F. Kennedy's. But for Pamela Murphy, the public ceremony was only the beginning of what she would have to face alone. After Audie died, Pamela was left with far more than grief. She was left with debt. She moved out of their comfortable ranch-style home in Van Nuys and into a small apartment, then took a clerk's job at the nearby Sepulveda Veterans Administration Hospital in Los Angeles. Think about what that means. The widow of America's most decorated war hero, a woman who had raised 2 children while her husband's face appeared on movie posters and magazine covers, was now working as a hospital clerk to pay off someone else's gambling debts. She did it without complaint, and she did it completely. According to those who knew her, it took nearly a decade, but Pamela paid off every cent of Audie's debts. As one account put it, nobody would ever say Audie Murphy welched on a deal. And then something unexpected happened. The clerk job became something much more. Any soldier or Marine who walked into the Sepulveda VA hospital in the 35 years that followed Audie's death got the VIP treatment from Pam Murphy. She would walk the hallways with her clipboard in hand, making sure veterans got to see the doctors and specialists they needed. If they were made to wait too long, she would take a veteran by the hand and walk him directly into the doctor's office herself. She was reprimanded for it. She did not care. She never called a veteran by his first name, recalled Stephen Sherman, a veteran who witnessed her work firsthand. It was always Mr. Respect came with the job. Nobody could cut through VA red tape faster than Mrs. Murphy. She was our angel. She was so tight on funds that she could barely afford to visit Audie's grave at Arlington. So she asked a friend in Washington to place flowers there every Veterans Day on her behalf. The widow of a war hero, quietly tending to her husband's memory from a distance because the debts he left behind had made even that small act of love a logistical challenge. In 2002, when budget cuts at the Sepulveda VA threatened to push Pamela out of her position, veterans organized and protested, and she stayed. The men whose paperwork she had fought through, whose doctors she had hunted down, whose names she had always prefaced with Mr., they were not going to let her go without a fight. Pamela Murphy worked at the VA until she was 87 years old. She died peacefully in her sleep on April 8, 2010, at the age of 90, in the same Canoga Park apartment she had moved into after Audie's death. She was survived by her sons, Terry and James. She was in bed watching a Laker game, took one last breath, and that was it, said Diane Ruiz, who had cared for Pam in the last years of her life. Her official obituary and to describe her as a veteran's friend and advocate. The condolences it poured in were not just for Audie's widow. They were for Pamela Murphy, a woman who had built her own quiet, extraordinary legacy alongside a man who could not always deserve her. The story of Audie Murphy is usually told as the story of a hero, and it should be, because what he did at Holtzwer on January 26, 1945, was genuinely, uncomplicatedly heroic. He was 19 years old. He was wounded, and he stood alone on a burning machine while 250 men tried to kill him because he could not bear to let his friends die. But the story of Audie Murphy is also the story of a man who brought the war home in ways that destroyed parts of his life that no metal could repair. A man who succumbed to addiction, recklessness, infidelity, and the slow financial unraveling that comes when a brilliant soldier tries to navigate a peacetime world he was never properly equipped for. And it is most powerfully the story of Pamela Archer Murphy, the woman who was handed all of it, the love, the debt, the confession, the grace to say, even after everything, she did not deny the rumors. She did not protect a myth. She confirmed the truth and then chose love anyway. That is its own kind of courage, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't make the front page, but that lasts in the memory of every veteran who felt her hand on their shoulder in a hospital hallway. For a very long time, America gave Audie Murphy its highest honor. He gave it everything he had in return, and Pamela gave everything she had to both of them, to the man and to the mission, without ever asking for a medal. She deserved one. Biography.com, Audie Murphy Profile 2021, INSB.com, Verified Facts on Murphy's Service and State. HistoryNet.com, Battle of Holtzwer, World War II Magazine, May 2002 edition, Military.com, Medal of Honor Action Detail, Wikipedia/U.S. Army Official Medal of Honor citation. Los Angeles Times/Steve Lopez column. April 2010. Pamela Murphy obituary. Legacy.com official obituary. Pamela Opal Lee Murphy, October 7, 1923 to April 8, 2010. VFW Post 10018 published account of Pamela Murphy's VA service. FindAgrave.com memorial documentation. Sepulveda VA Hospital veteran testimonials. As reported in LA Times, April 2010. All quoted speech attributed to Pamela Murphy originates from the Los Angeles Times 2010 profile by Steve Lopez, widely corroborated and republished by VFW, Veterans Today, and multiple archive sources.